Hi friends, welcome to this latest episode of the Nationalist View. Today we have with us a very special guest, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Ambassador Kumar, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Arunji, for having me. It's a pleasure.
And Ambassador Mohan Kumar, he has served in the diplomatic service for 36 years. He was Indian ambassador to France and Bahrain. He has led negotiations uh, from on behalf of India at in crucial multilateral organizations like WTO and GATT. And he also played an important role when the climate change summit was held in Paris. Today we are going to talk about, and currently he is associated with OP Jindal Global University. He's a professor of diplomacy there. Ambassador Kumar, I want to discuss about ever since Donald Trump has taken over the presidency in his second term. So there seems to be a growing divide between the European Union and the US. Though US and Europe as the optics are considered to be traditionally very close allies, especially in context of having their multilateral organizations like NATO. But ever since Trump has come, so there seems to be a growing wedge between the two. So I wanted your viewpoint on this. How do you look at it, and what are its implications for India?
Thank you very much for having me, as I said, Arunji. But I think I want to begin by saying that this is a geopolitical earthquake, whichever way you look at it, because transatlantic relationship is the basis for the liberal international order, which was established in the aftermath of World War II. Whichever way you look at it, without the transatlantic relationship, that is United States and Europe, there is no world order which was established post World War II. You cannot think of anything. Having said that, it's also true that the United States was the main power which gave security and military ballast to the relationship. And it is also true that other US presidents have been repeatedly telling Europe that, listen, please try to increase your expenditure on defense. Of course, Americans will always stand by you. This was until Trump. They said, please, but please increase because, you are rich economies. You cannot expect always the Americans to bear 70% of the expenditure and so on. That is why even in Barack Obama's time, but also Trump 1.0, they went on telling Europe that at least try to meet 2% of the GDP should be devoted to defense. That target has also been not met by, there are only 23 countries out of 32 countries in the NATO which have met that target. So this was the relationship. But I would say at no point in the time when the pre-Trump period, at no point was the transatlantic relationship in danger of breaking because there was a threat perception which was common. There was a relationship based on values, and there was history. What Mr. Trump has done is to, in one fell swoop, he has destroyed all three. He says, I don't care about history. I'm bothered about now. And right now, you guys are ripping me off. For a sitting US president to say that the EU was established to screw the United States, quote unquote, and they're doing a good job of it. It's an extraordinary statement coming from a sitting US president. Secondly, in the context of Ukraine, which has turned out to be an existential war for Europe. I mean, the way the Europeans have termed the Ukraine war, they say that it's a matter of life or death for us, not just for the Ukrainians. So we have to support Ukraine as long as it takes. That is the position of Europe. Mr. Donald Trump has become the president, and suddenly he has said that we have no skin in the game in Europe and in Ukraine. Especially in Ukraine, he says, what is our interest? So, but to say what is in our interest and to say, like Mr. Biden, that I'm not going to put American troops on the ground, but I will give you weapons, intelligence is one thing. Mr. Trump has gone one step further. He has said, I don't care about everything that has happened before, but the war must end. And he says, which is why the ugly spat in the White House that you were witness between the Ukrainian president and the American president, he basically told the Ukrainian president that you have no cards with you, you have lost the war, so let us settle peace. And in an extraordinary diplomatic move, he ended the isolation of Russia and Putin. This is what President Trump has done by making the call to Putin, by telling him that, listen, I need your help and I need you to engage and let's bring the war to an end. He has removed the isolation factor of Russia. Until then, there was no question of an American president talking to Putin. So that's the first. Second thing President Trump has done, he has told Ukraine, please forget about taking back the territories from Russia and please forget about joining NATO. Now, those are very, very important bargaining points for Ukraine. It's one thing for Ukraine to come to that conclusion after the negotiations, but it's another matter if United States tells Russia, these two are gone. You don't have to give up your territory. He's telling Russia, he's telling Ukraine, you cannot join NATO. Then what is left to negotiate really? The only thing you can negotiate is you freeze the conflict and you make it like the Korean Peninsula, which is not even a ceasefire. It's called an armistice. You do an armistice, and then there is this thorny question. Okay, all this is fine at one level. The other level is the Europeans are asking, okay, we will try and go along with the ceasefire agreement. Please tell us, will you be able to provide security guarantees to Ukraine? To which President Trump says, no, I don't have any guarantees to give other than the fact that I will take 50% of the rare earths and minerals from Ukraine. And there will be Americans on the ground in Ukraine as commercial operators and economic operators. But that should be enough because during my tenure, Putin is not going to kill the Americans who work there. So this is where we are. But behind all this geopolitics is the philosophical understanding of MAGA. This is Make America Great Again movement. And one must understand the motivation for why they are saying this. And Arunji, they are saying essentially the following. Both President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance, who also made a scathing attack on Europe in the Munich Security Conference, what they both are saying is you cannot have a they are telling Europe, you cannot have a welfare state in which everybody has access to healthcare, everybody has access to education, your people are getting 2 months vacation in a year, you are retiring at 60 years old, you get fat pensions. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little. Mainly, this happens mainly in France. It doesn't mean it happens in every European country, but you are getting the picture of what I'm saying. Both President Trump and Vice President Vance are saying, you are able to do all this because we are spending on your security. That is why you are able to lead such a life. Now, please tighten your belts. Take care of your security yourselves. We will give you some support here and there, but you should take care primarily of your security. And therefore, Europe is left with a very, very thorny problem, which is they have managed to lead a particular kind of life. And they've got something known as a fiscal stability pact in Europe, which means you cannot exceed 3% of your GDP as budget deficit, cannot exceed a 60 or 70% of your GDP as public debt. Once you decide that you're going to spend on defense, all this fiscal discipline will go for a 6. And I suspect they will also be required to make significant cuts to their welfare state. I will take 2 or 3 minutes more, if you allow me, on implications for India. The implications for India and more generally for a lot of middle powers is this. The United States States is basically revealing itself as a transactional power. And the trust factor is gone. A lot of countries will say that if the United States can treat Europe like this, where do we stand? So it will lead to countries resorting to what I have called strategic hedging. That means I will also not, if I am a pragmatic, intelligent power, it doesn't matter India, ASEAN, Japan, South Korea, all of them are the same. But your question was addressed to India. If I am a pragmatic, intelligent person, I will not put all my eggs in the American basket because I will then seek to diversify my risk. How does India diversify its risk? Two important ways. One, EU and India. EU came and visited India with the entire College of Commissioners. So we welcome that. And I think both EU and India will now have very strong reasons for coming closer together to at least hedge their bets vis-a-vis President Trump. Secondly, India cannot shut all options, even with regard to China. Because we don't know, we have seen the cards that President Trump has revealed with regard to Mexico, with regard to Canada, with regard to Europe, but we have not seen his cards vis-a-vis China. The only thing that is happening is these people, the Americans are imposing tariffs and the Chinese are imposing counter tariffs. But we don't know if they have a grand bargain between America and China. My contention is that India's strategic space will diminish accordingly, in which case we also have to spread our bets or hedge our bets. And we have a lot of powers to do that. EU is one of them. Japan is another one. Australia is another one. To some extent, even the thaw in our relationship with China, I would say, is because China actually extended an olive branch to India. They are the ones who are now saying, let's not fight so much. Let's get together and try to talk. They're also doing it because they're doing the same strategic hedging that others are doing because of the fundamental unreliability of President Trump. They also are finding it difficult and struggling to cope with a president who has generally brought geopolitical turbulence and geopolitical uncertainty to today's world. That would be my response to your questions.
Mr. Kumar, there has been a lot of discussion about the rise of the rightist parties in Europe. We have recently seen elections in Germany also. What happened there? So, do you think that if this rise of the right continues in Europe, because Trump seems to be more comfortable with the authoritarian regimes, and he seems to be more comfortable with the right of the with the rightists. So, do you think that the way Europe, there is a rise of right in the Europe. So probably, in if not in days to come, in months to come, or in the long run, there can be, this divide can be kind of it can go away and situation can be just like, the pre-Trump 2.0 era. Also, I wanted you to comment on, are we exaggerating actually the rise of right wing in Europe? Because a lot of discussion on this thing, or is it just merely optics that in a couple of countries this is happening? So overall, what is the scenario? Because I think this rise of the right, it's a very interesting issue. Yeah.
So I think that's an excellent couple of questions you posed to me. I would begin by answering your second question first. Then it becomes easier for me to answer your first question about how Trump, whether he will be comfortable with the right or not. I think you are absolutely spot on when you say, or when you ask me, whether we exaggerate the rise of right. To some extent, I would say we do. There is no doubt that a major part of the world is lurching to the right. That there is no doubt. We have to be clear about it. And when I say we are lurching to the right, what I mean is anti-immigration sentiment is rising. We versus you, or you versus me. That is assertion of one's ethnic identity to the exclusion of others is also becoming more and more prominent. Correspondingly, in the case of the right, they don't want to accept globalization, unbridled globalization. They say we are not in favor of unregulated entry of goods and services and people across the world, which is the definition of globalization, essentially. So they are also opposed to globalization. Behind the rise of this right is the problem of the middle class in the West, which has not benefited from globalization because they are not skilled enough. If you are talking about artificial intelligence, the rise of digitization of the economy, you can benefit it only if you have gone to college, you've gone to university, and so on. We wrongly think that anybody in the Western world is a PhD or a master's. That is simply not true. If you take the United States, for example, the shocking statistic is 40% of the people have not gone to college or university. When we say college, their college is different. What I mean is university. 40% of America has not availed of higher education. How is he going to benefit from globalization? So that is the root cause of the rise of the right. And there are people like President Trump, but like Marine Le Pen in France, like the AfD party in Germany, they are exploiting this sentiment by telling these people, don't listen to the establishment, don't listen to these liberal leftist people. They've taken you for a ride. They've gone to Harvard and Stanford and MIT. They will get their jobs, but you will be left in the lurch. Whether you like it or not, imagine a convincing number of blacks and Latinos voted for Mr. Trump. Can you believe it? Forget the whites. The MAGA crowd is there. I am talking about Latinos. And when we say Latinos in the US, I want to remind your audience that the vast majority is actually Cubans. We're talking Cubans. A lot of them are Cubans and blacks. You would imagine that they would be more interested in voting with the Democratic Party, which is true until recently. But they all voted for Mr. Trump because they feel that their lot is not gotten better under the liberals. So they want to give him an opportunity. So I would say we are exaggerating the rise of the right, yes, but there is no gainsaying the fact that there is a lurch to the right in Europe and in the West in general. Your most interesting question, for which I must compliment you, is that should such a thing happen, your question is, will Trump find it more difficult or easy to live with them? And you are also asking a further point, can we go to status quo ante? That is how things work. That's an excellent point. My sense is that we will not be able to go to status quo ante because the basic trust has been broken. Europe is not so naive. They have received a very rude wake-up call, and they will now spend on defense, even if it means cutting down their welfare state, even if it means it takes 5 to 10 years. The question, therefore, for me is, yes, some people like the Italian Prime Minister is able to deal with the Trump administration much better than, let us say, Mr. Macron of France. It is a fact. Prime Minister Meloni is definitely able to deal. But I don't think it will resolve the fundamental contradiction. The fundamental contradiction was highlighted by J.D. Vance in the Munich Security Conference, where he says, you are able to lead a good life because of the money given by America for your defense. We are not going to be naive and we are not going to be ripped off by you anymore. That will not change, even with the Meloni and a Marine Le Pen and an AfD party in power, which has not happened. But let's assume for the sake of argument that it happens. I don't think that fundamental contradiction will change. Some of them may have better relations with Trump. So in other words, I'm offering you my prognosis for whatever it is worth that the break between US and Europe, to my mind, is definitive and to my mind is irreversible, at least in the short to medium term. In the long run, as John Maynard Keynes said, we are all dead, so it doesn't matter. But in the short and medium term, I think it is irreversible. The transatlantic break has happened. This will lead to a fundamental restructuring of the world order. It will lead to Russia being rehabilitated. What China will do, we will have to wait and see. I want to conclude this segment by telling your audience my thinking at this point is that Trump, it's very difficult to read Trump's mind, but I'm going to try and speculate. This is speculation. Trump is leaning towards three spheres of influence. He only likes to deal with great powers. The great powers, according to him, are United States, China, and Russia. Everybody else, he thinks, is a middle power or whatever power. So he doesn't take EU also seriously in that sense. For United States, he believes the natural sphere of influence is the Western Hemisphere and the Western Pacific to some extent. For Russia, he believes that Russia should have a sphere of influence in Europe. The Europeans don't like it, but he believes, and this is one of the few areas in which I agree with Trump. I don't think you can build or rebuild a security architecture in Europe without Russia. That's my view. And that certainly seems to be his view. To that extent, I agree with President Trump. You cannot build a security architecture in Europe, leaving out the most important country, Russia, no matter how much you hate it. In geopolitics, you don't bring hatred or love. You have to look at it pragmatically and ruthlessly. So if you look at it with ruthless pragmatism, you cannot leave out Russia. That is the second sphere of influence. How much zone of influence Russia will get, I don't know. But some influence they should have. Third, and the most important question for India, existential question, is China going to get its own sphere of influence in East Asia? This is something we have to consider very carefully, not because we are directly concerned, but we will be indirectly concerned because if China gets a sphere of influence in East Asia, it is more likely to assert itself on our border. It will be more settled. It will not have tension with Trump. So it is more likely to assert itself in the Himalayas vis-a-vis India. It's more likely to assert itself in India's neighborhood. You know, the string of pearls strategy and the rest of it, that will become more difficult for India. I've said publicly, I've written about this saying there will be a diminution of India's strategic options if China gets a sphere of influence. Now, I don't think, in my view, if I can speak frankly, I don't think we are a middle power. So I don't think we have the agency or the clout to prevent this from happening. So we have to carefully monitor the situation and adjust our foreign and security policy accordingly. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. And I want to share with our viewers that Mr. Kumar has written two books. We'll be sharing the link of these two books in the description box also. I think these two are must-read books for any student of diplomacy. And I've been told by my sources in the Jindal University that there is a clamor for attending Ambassador Kumar's classes on diplomacy. So among the students.
Thank you
So
very much, Arunji.
and we have just, in this conversation witnessed that how, in a very lucid manner, he has demystified such complex issues. And thank you so much, Mr. Kumar, for sharing these pearls of wisdom with us. And we'll be back soon with another issue and another discussion. And we hope to get also Mr. Kumar back again on one of our podcasts soon. If you want to ask any questions, about the topic which we have discussed, you can share that in the comment box of the YouTube video which we are going to post. And thank you once again for watching, and we'll meet soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.